Well, welcome back to Season 2, Episode 4 of the Powered Up Coaches Show, brought to you by Sideline Power, your one-stop shop for all of your coaching technology needs. Here is a name you're going to get to know. His name is Ty Wisdom, and he is the head coach at Millard South, entering year 2. Folks, this show is chock full of great learning lessons. But before we get to those, you're going to learn about his early days in Lexington, Nebraska, a tough blue-collar town, and what Friday night lights meant to him going to those football games in Lexington. You're also going to hear about how he's been a turnaround artist. His first 2 head coaching jobs, he went into programs that he had to rebuild and reestablish, and the lessons as a coach that you can take from that. The coaching tree from which he comes from, there's all kinds of names in that. Coach Barron's at UNO. How about Lance Leipold, who's now the head coach at Kansas, and many others? You'll hear about how they inspired him and how they taught him. And lastly, how building team can start in the summers with the trips that the players at Millard South take and the time they spend together, about it being more than just how they do on the field. It's about more how they build that camaraderie and family. Great episode. Get to know Coach Wisdom. Well, listen, the smartest guy I know, Coach Ty Wisdom. I bet you've heard that a time or two, haven't you? Yeah, great name for a football coach, though, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you've proven it over the years. And before we get into the whole football discussion, we got to start in Lexington, Nebraska, because that's where you grew up. And here's my view of it. And Coach, you tell me if I'm right or wrong. Blue collar, tough. Meatpacking plants, tough people. Is that right? I mean, when you grew up there, did you feel that toughness?
Yeah, it was a great town. When I talk to guys, that are a few years older than I am, they talked about Lexington in the 90s and in the 80s. That was like, top 3 on their list. If you're going to coach, you want to coach at a school like that. And, it says a lot about the people that have come through there. Not only they've had great athletes, but, just great coaches, and a lot of them, it obviously means a lot to them because most of them are still in that town.
Mm-hmm. When you grow up in a small town, you get an opportunity to play a lot of sports. You were a 3-sport guy. What were the 3 sports first off, and what did you early on gravitate to out of those 3 sports?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough. I loved every sport that was going on at the time, right? So I played football and then basketball, and then grew up, we're a family of golfers, so I played a lot of golf, and so enjoyed that, and gave up baseball early, but honestly, it was just one of those that whatever was in season I loved, and just loved to compete and really just be around my buddies, and I think that's a lot of what athletics is about.
One of the things that I know you've talked about is the importance of multi-sport athletes in the football arena. So I want you to break it down. Give me something. I know golf, is not necessarily, people don't think of it as the most athletic sport, but tell me something in golf that you learned or a skill that you got that could help you towards football.
Well, I mean, everything's mental. I think I just was talking to our guys this morning about, I like how we're moving around, but we got to be tougher up here, and you got to, and you know how to go, and you got to, you talk about playing the next play. Well, golf, you got to play the next shot. Okay. And, you're competing against the course most of the time, early and stuff. And so just a mental part of it, and how, it's a long, you compare an 18-hole round to maybe a football season, right? It's a long grind. You got to stay dialed in for, 4.5 hours or whatever that is. And, it's the same thing in any sport.
Yeah. I also want to know from baseball, because there are so many finite skills, right, with baseball. So what was baseball? What did you pull from baseball skill-wise that you were able to use in football?
Yeah, just the eye-hand coordination, work. I mean, I think just, as far as why I think soccer for little kids is a great thing, and just that part of it. And then, in any team sport, it's the ability to learn how to compete, deal with adversity, go through tough times, and, just I think it's good too to be coached by different people, and how do you react?
Yeah. You know what I love so much about what you're saying is that it's so much mental, right? I mean, you tend to gravitate back towards the things that aren't necessarily always skill sets, but it's what's above the shoulder and how you can learn from those sports and of course in football bring those in, and that's why you've been such a huge advocate, right, of the multi-sport.
Yeah, no question. Well, just because I had obviously, I think high school athletics are such a huge deal as far as having a good high school experience, right? And you talk about, like, when I interview for different jobs, and I think it's important when the administration says, like, it's important for our athletics to be successful because it makes our school year go a lot better. And sometimes I think that doesn't always happen everywhere. And you understand, the pride and different things that come about with that. I mean, it's a shame now that, like we had an awesome girls basketball team last year, and they're playing at noon one day, and the big school, they don't let out anymore, right? And I get it, like, not everybody's gonna go, but man, what a cool thing for those girls. And they're not, but it just, it's that small town feel where, like, shut down the town, everybody's going to support them, and different things like that, and that part of it just doesn't happen anymore. And I've always said, it's frustrating, because I believe if you were able to do that, you're gonna get tons more people out there supporting, but also showing whatever sport that does that, all the work that they put in, we're here to support you and do that.
I love it. The football team showing up. And, let's go back to the small town. You talked about shutting down the small town in Lexington. Friday Night Lights. If we go back there to your days growing up, give me that visual. What was it like at a Lexington football game on a Friday night?
Yeah, so, I mean, my parents still live a block away from the stadium, and I can remember as a little kid, you'd look out, and if it was Lex playing Cozad 15 miles apart, like, there'd be people jumping the fence the night before, putting their blanket and, locking their seat into where nobody was going to take their seat. Because, there was games, back in those 90s where, in the early 90s, or, it was standing room only, show up. And, I mean, there was some dang good football players back in the day. And it was just, it was a great rivalry, right? Like, I mean, I think a lot of great rivalries, and every place I've been, I've tried to, if there wasn't one, I tried to create one, because I just think that's great for high school sports.
Oh, it is. And I'll tell you what, that's the magic of Bill McCartney, right? Back in Colorado, back in his day, designating Nebraska as the big rival. And boy, what a series that was. But you talk about, Friday night in Lexington, and there's a couple of guys, Jeff Sykes and Chad Jaeger. I read about their Jaeger.
Yep.
Tell me about those guys and the role they played in inspiring you.
What's funny, so Chad, he's one of my good friends that lives in Arizona. So he came to probably 90% of my games when I was coaching in Arizona. So, he grew up, we're next door neighbors. So he's about 10 years older than I am, but, he was just one of my idols as far as, he was the quarterback in football. He was a stud basketball player, played golf as well. So we just kind of followed in that, and just, and Sykes lived a block away, and I can remember, he tried to play the state finals one year with a broken ankle against Elkhorn out here, and it was just the toughness, and growing up with my dad being an assistant coach for Coach Locks and stuff, like, just being around those guys, and why I talk to our guys about all the time about, when they see these young kids, like, they are looking up to you. Because, I mean, I remember, like, one of my birthday parties one year in February was to go to the basketball practice, and we brought my buddies, and they signed blow up basketballs or whatever, and that's where it was at. And I just think that, and it's not lost everywhere, but I think it's important to know, like, that we have guys right now that, I'm like, man, those kids I just had a youth camp last week, and they're wanting pictures with, Chase Lofton, Amarion Jackson, Jet Tamala, Carter Glass. I mean, those guys, they look up to you, so it's important, for you to, embrace that role.
Yeah, and that's such a great role that you can play, having your experience going through that, knowing what those guys meant to you when you were a youngster. How do you try to, I know you mentioned it to them, say, hey, look, you don't know who's watching, right? But how do you try to get that to the Chase Loftons and all of those, everybody, whether they're a second string backup center or anybody on your roster? How do you make sure that they understand the impact that they can have on those youngsters too?
Yeah, I think it's number one, we talk about, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, when you're a part of this program, you're representing, South football. And so, whether you're at the grocery store or whether you're hanging out at the park with your buddy, whatever you're doing, somebody's probably watching you. And, I say at my parent meeting all the time, like, you're held to a higher standard just because you put on that jersey. And, you got to embrace it. Okay. If it was easy, we'd have 800 kids out for football. It's not easy. You're choosing a more difficult path, a lot more rewarding one. But also knowing that, they see it. I'm super fortunate the kids that we have right now are tremendous role models for our young kids. But they see it because, I encourage the youngsters to be ball boys at games. And, I tell them all the time about, I want my daughter and my son to come out to practice and watch it. And, and so when we do have actions that, we might not like, explain to them why we can't do that. Mm-hmm. Right. And at the end of the day, our whole, wins and losses, they're going to come and go. These kids going out and being successful down the road is the most important thing. We talk about developing champions in life, and there's no better game than the team sport of football to teach them that.
Yeah. Well, listen, before we leave Lexington, we got to stop at Dinker Feedlot.
Oh, yeah.
We got to make a stop there because I understand you might have been one of their employees of the century, right?
Oh, yeah.
Of the year.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your time at Dinker Feedlot and what the heck did you do there?
Yeah. So my best friend to this day is he was my high school center. It's Chris. And so they called. I said, hey, we're going to lay some pipe. Can you come out? And I said, yeah, I can come out for a while. And I showed up and I had white golf shorts on and a polo. And I think I lasted about 45 minutes. So he's never let that go. But,
oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I right there was a sign that you weren't quite ready for it. We show it with all white, right?
Right.
Feedlot. I love it. Well, those are the jobs. You talk about building character or what you're going to do later in life. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things that build a little character.
No question. Yeah. No question.
Well, listen, your work ethic. Who shaped it? I know that your mom and dad played a very important role in your life. Your dad, Tom Wisdom, is one of the mentors that you told me a little bit about. How did they shape that work ethic in you?
Yeah, just, I think it was just growing up in town, and it was, we didn't go on vacations. It wasn't, our vacation was, hey, you're going to go to the Columbus Holiday Tournament this year, basketball. And I still tell people, I thought I had everything in the world, which I did, what
right.
I mean? So I was just fortunate. My mom was a speech pathologist. My dad was a coach and a math teacher. And they just, I got two older brothers, and they've raised us the right way as far as that goes and what's really important. And I think that, you can control your effort and you can control your attitude. We talk about that every day in our program. You can't control, a lot of things, but those two things you can. And so at the end of the day, you get a choice to wake up and you get one shot at this thing. And so, we just try to embrace that mentality each day. And, and so I talk about that with our kids all the time. And I feel like, when I've taken different jobs, obviously this is my third one. I always tell the team, day one, I'm like, I'm not asking you to respect me as your head coach. Like, that's leading by title. You don't even know me. I got thrown in front of you. But at the end of the day, we're going to go to work. And then we'll start building that trust, all that stuff. And then at some point, then I'm going to be able to coach you hard. But right now, we're just going to go to work together. Mm-hmm. And that's what's working. I don't feel like, the days are over. You do this because I said so. No, they need to know the why. But I just feel like it's a relationship-based deal that I think is really important, and it's always been my philosophy as a head coach.
You played for some great people, but you played for your father, right? He was
Correct.
An assistant coach.
Yep.
What was that like, and what did you pull from that experience, specifically playing for him?
It was, he was an assistant. It was hard. Probably,
and why was that?
Probably harder on him. I wasn't very easy to coach sometimes, and I sometimes to this day I'm like, why did you put up with that? I wouldn't now. But, I just, probably, and harder on my mom at the dinner table sometimes when it was just us three. But, and now growing up, looking back, and I just the things they did as far as the coaches that I had. And it's not just my dad. I could go on a list of those guys in Lexington because they truly did it for the right reasons. They build relationships. What they said was gold. Because I tell young coaches this all the time. I said, my number one thing to tell you is, if you tell something to somebody, to a kid, you better make it happen. Or you need to explain yourself, because we all know people are promised a lot of things, but when you start going back on your word, then that trust is lost, and that's hard to get back. So just always got to be very careful in that aspect. But yeah, I was just, as far as the work ethic goes, and just was fortunate with, everywhere I've been. And football's known as a game of grinders, but you talk about Coach Burns at UNO,
Yes.
and Coach Leipold and those guys too, and Coach Rice at North Platte, and Coach Cool at Kearney, and I've been under just great. I've never been a place where there's bad, bad coach or anything like that. They've always done the right thing for kids, and that's why I put on there, I don't just have two mentors, because I respect them all. It's not an easy gig. But at the end of the day, you got to be yourself too, right? And so you just kind of mold that through.
Right. Pull all of those
Correct.
lessons from them, and then put it in, obviously, the Coach Wisdom way. And
right.
Here's what it so impressed me about you before we ever met. I sent you a little questionnaire. I said, hey, give me your top 2 mentors. And you said, look, there's no way I can give you 2. I've got to give you the ones that played a big influence. And you gave me 9.
Yeah.
You gave me 9. Coach Locks, who you played for at Lexington, of course. And one of those names, and you went through many of them, but Coach Leipold, who's now at Kansas doing great things. Tell me, what did you see in him? Would you have ever thought that this guy's going to be running, a Power 5 Division I program? What did you see from him at that time?
Yeah, so he was our running backs coach and offensive coordinator. And I was kind of his right-hand GA. And just, I was a little grown. I didn't know really a thing about football, at that time. I'd just gotten out of college, and just the thing with Coach Leipold was, one, he was a relentless worker, and it was just the details. I'll never forget we were doing our playbook in Coach's office, and there was a little tiny line that it needed moved. He's like, I need this moved one. And I'm just like, this guy is nuts. Look, but and as I take now that's how I'm with that kind of stuff is, every little detail matters. And obviously you can see that what he's done from Whitewater to Buffalo to Kansas is just truly remarkable. And the big thing with all of these coaches is, they know how to surround themselves with great people.
Yeah. You talked earlier about having, and by the way, I got to just take a little story here. Jason Kazar, who works for us, played for Bill Snyder.
Okay. And
one of the things that he always says is that with Coach Snyder, the details matter. He would always say that, Coach Snyder, about the importance of details. So interesting. Coach Leipold falls in that same category. But collectively, when you look at those 9 that you sent to me, collectively, was there a common thread between them of their leadership style or the way they led young men? Was there something common that you saw with all of them that you're like, I got to take that, because all 9 of these guys emulated this kind of behavior or thought process?
Yeah, with all of them, they're all just really solid to the core, but also have their core values of certain things. I'm not going to budge on that, right? And that's when I go back to consistency. I think that's a huge word for a coach. And obviously I've taken over 3 different programs, and usually year 1 is it's hard, right? Because people are going, why is he doing this? Why isn't he playing that kid or whatever? And so you go through it, but it's the consistency part that these guys, you knew what guy you were going to get every day. When I talk about those 9, and all 9 of them are still guys that I could pick up the phone and call right now. And they're going to tell me not what I want to hear, but what I probably need to hear, and that's, those are the kind of people that I like to be around, but also the kind of people that I think kids like to play for. I think we talk about it at South that, your kid, you're going to know where you stand. Where we film everything, you're going to sit down, we're going to be honest. You might not like what you hear. Now, how do you respond?
Yeah, I love that, because I think that's I think truly people want that honest feedback. There's so much these days of telling kids what, they want to hear. But I love the fact that you come out about it as, look, we're going to tell you, because ultimately That's how they get better, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those are and it's got to be taught that way, and they got to know that. But again, like what I go back to is build the trust first. Then you can then you can talk to them, in a constructive criticism way of, hey, we got to get better at this, and this. I mean, if people watch me coach their kids, they're, man, you coach them hard. I know them, like I know them all. Like there's certain kids I can't coach hard yet. I don't know them. I'm trying to figure it out, but they're gonna know that. I'm going to do anything for them on and off the field.
Yeah, you take me to a place that I want to go, because a young coach, right, they're going to hear you coach them hard. But there's that balance, right? There's that balance of how do you make, I always call it deposit and withdrawals. I stole that from some leader somewhere along the line. But how do you make sure you make the right amount of deposits so that, when you need to take that withdrawal out from that kid, you got to be hard on them, you got to push them, that there's that balance. Because for a young coach, I think sometimes they hear you got to be hard on them, but that balance isn't there. How do you make sure that balance is there?
Yeah, I think, number one, you got to be yourself, right? You can't show up and try to be somebody else. So that part of it. And I always try to end practice on a positive note. You always want to try to start out, positive, and at the end of the day, like, it's a game. Okay. And we're going to make this fun. Fun is winning, and competing. And, we're gonna make lightest of things, but, that's a tough question just because, there are certain, but, it's one of those things where you got to remind yourself walking off. And I'm a big believer in, if I'm hard on a kid, you're probably going to see me either walking out with him after practice, or I'm going to text him and say, hey, let's meet up for breakfast tomorrow morning.
Right.
Let's talk through this.
I love it.
And just making sure that kids know, hey, why am I, the old adage, like, if I stop talking to you, you probably better start worrying, because I probably don't think you have anything to bring to the table.
Yeah, they're worth the investment. Yeah. Well, listen, you've had your life lessons as well. You get injured at Kearney, right?
Yep.
And I've interviewed so many coaches, just a couple, in fact, this year, where they got injured, oftentimes in college, and they've obviously taken a path to coaching. And what I'm curious about is, when you go through that and you can't be on the field, do you see the game differently? Does that start to kind of promote that thought of coaching, because you're able to kind of step back, you're not in the middle of it, and see the game in its entirety? Did that ever, or did you know it before that?
I always wanted to be a coach. I didn't know maybe football, basketball. Like, it's all I knew. Right? I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to coach.
When did that moment hit you? How old were you?
Probably elementary school. Because I just loved seeing, the guys in Lexington. Those were Coach Locks, Coach Thorell, my dad, just all those guys. They were like gods in the town. I said, no, but kids literally would run through a wall for them, and it was just so cool. And I just saw the impact that they were having on everybody, and did, right? You look at, what guys are doing, that Coach Locke and all these coaches have coached, what they're doing in their lives now. It's truly, and you talk about them all, and they'll bring up those guys. So
it's interesting that you wanted to do it so young, too. You just had that path, which again speaks to your mentors and the quality of mentors.
100%.
Yeah. When you got hurt, does it give you a different perspective today as a coach? Unfortunately, it's a rough game. It's a physical game. You're going to have guys that lose a season, lose part of a season. Does that give you a different appreciation, having gone through what you went through?
Yeah, and I think biggest thing is, that first of all, injuries are the worst part of sports. It's the only thing. You can't control them, but it's one of those things where things have just changed so much over the years. But going through certain things and understanding it can be tough on a kid mentally. To know, I may never play, football is a game where you're not strapping it up when you're 25, or you're probably, most of you are done after high school. And a lot of, we talk about it all the time, you can remember the last time you put pads on. Most people can, because it's one of those sports, and that's why I love coaching it, because it is that, You can go play golf. You can play pickup basketball. You can do all those things. You get one shot at this thing.
Yeah. And that's why I think that last game of senior year for so many players is so amazingly emotional,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes. I mean,
there's a few going
is.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're never going to, like, when I talk to guys that get out of coaching, they'll be like, I don't, like, buddy of mine that's in the business world now, he coached college forever, and he was like, I don't really miss the coaching, but I miss the team aspect, right? Like that part of it. And, I think that I mean, that's a big thing. And like, you don't have that anymore either, you know? And so that's why it's important too, to know that we are building these lifelong relationships with these guys. And I want to, it's, there's a lot of guys, but I want these guys comfortable to be able to say, hey, you can come back and, be a part of our program, or if you ever need anything, reach out, and it's the most rewarding things when these guys come back and they're like, hey, I'm this, that, and the other, and they want to go out for dinner, and just seeing them be successful because you see them grow up, and that's the neat part.
Yeah, the relationships you get to build. Well, you've also built some relationships through coaching. Your career to me is like one of perseverance when I take a look at it, because you started out, obviously as an assistant coach at Kearney.
Yep.
A lot of assistants, coach positions, and I want to ask you about that. Then North Platte High School, you're an assistant. Go to UNO as a grad assistant. That's where Coach Burns and Coach Leipold. Then at Fremont High School, Millard South assistant. Then you go to Arizona, Surprise, Arizona. First off, what took you there to be an assistant, by the way?
Yeah, I was 29, single, and I'm one of those people, like, if you're going to complain about it, you got to do something about it. Like, I was like, it was a brutal winter. And I was like, what am I doing?
So you were complaining about the weather.
Yeah, I was like, what am I doing here? I had nothing to do. And I remember going into Coach Means, and I was like, I think I'm leaving. And he was, because there were some things that he wanted me to move forward doing, and I was like, I don't want to tell him that and then leave. He's like, you're not leaving. He's like, nobody from Nebraska leaves. I'm like, I think I am. He's like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to throw my resume out to, teaching, and throw my resume out to, I wanted to go someplace warm, Florida, Arizona, Vegas. And so I started doing a little more, and I was like, you know what? Talking to Chad Yeager, who lives out there, still does. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna look and see if I can get a teaching job out there. And I had, and people don't, and I get it, because I used to get a ton of them. But when you send your resume out there, like, I'll talk to you when you get here, right? Like, move here, but like, I can't. You know how high school coaching is. I can't. Sorry, your salary's not going to pay for your move and this and that. So, I was fortunate enough to have a few guys respond, but I said, I'm going to fly out there. If I can get this, I have my master's in special ed, so I go, I can get a teaching job. And I was fortunate enough to, I pulled it. And so took the U-Haul truck, bought a house in Surprise, Arizona. My wife now, so we dated about for a year. She came with me, best thing that ever happened there. And so, moved out there. And so I was in Surprise for a couple years. And just great kids at this high school. It's kind of like an inner city high school, but it was in Surprise. It was like right across the street from where the Royals play spring training. Just great kids, and we ended up winning a region championship and kind of flipped a little bit. And then I got lucky to get my first head job.
Yeah, how'd you get lucky? How'd it come about?
So I was like, I just need to get my name out. Like, I still need to, I didn't feel like I was, but I need to get my name out there. I need to go. So. I remember interviewing, and it's a little bit different in Arizona. Like, about 25 people on the committee. You got booster club members in there, people standing up, and so I'm like, oh, this is, And so, member interviewing, and I was like, yeah, that went terrible. Well, let's go. So we went out to dinner. I'm driving home, and I'm driving the next day on the interstate, and I get a call from the AD. He's like, hey, can you come in and see me tomorrow? And I was like, do you know who you're talking to? Seriously, I was like,
why did you think it went so bad?
I just didn't think, who knows, right? And so I was like, and so they brought me in and was like, talking to me about this, that, and the other. And I was like, yeah. And Horizon was known as, it got great tradition, but they had just gotten off an 0-9 season, and it was a like town hall, wipe the booster club out, It was a mess.
Yeah.
And so, so I mean, no head coaching experience. I was 31 years old. I walk in, and I remember it took a little while for everything to get through, and so I meet with the team finally. And of course, you know, like they're like, who is this guy? And so I meet him in the weight room. This is a school size of Millard South time, 2,500 kids, and there was like 35 kids that showed up, and I'm like, talk to him, and I remember walking out, calling my dad. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I just got myself into.
Yeah.
But I go back to, we're gonna go to work together each day. We're going to build this thing, okay? Because they were good just a few years prior.
Right.
So, fortunate enough, I hunted the hallways, got a good athlete back at quarterback that didn't go out the year before. Got this 6'9" receiver to come out that didn't. And we lost 4 games by a total of 9 points. We went 7-4 that year. Upset Chaparral, which was a huge rival in that, and it just got the community back believing it, because it's very supportive community there, and just great people. But the biggest thing that we were able to turn was just I had 4 coaching stipends open that year that I didn't even hire, because I'm like, I'd interview a guy, I'm like, no, I can't. Like I didn't want to fill a position, so I had one of my good buddies from Lexington. He moved out there and he coached because I trusted him. Mm-hmm. And so he was a huge part of that. His name's Jason Luft. And he did the defense. And it was just one of those things where we just grinded it.
How many coaches did you have in that year?
Oh, I want to say we had like 8, because normally I got 20 or something. And we were coaching. I mean, they were laughing because they were like, we would go from varsity practice and we'd just stay on the field. So then the youth would come after. We coached in that team. They're like, this guy keeps this up. We ain't gonna be around very long, so we're doing it. And so fortunate enough that ended up. Then it became a very attractive job very quickly, because we were getting kids in, and Arizona went to that open division where, so our Horizon was a 5A. It's all the way up to 6A. So about 2,400 kids, but there's schools with 4,000, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were fortunate enough to go 9-1 my 4th year there, and then ended up getting in. It was in the inaugural open division, and ended up getting into that. So it was just a great experience, great kids. We had some fun games where Notre Dame had a 26-game winning streak, had never lost on their field. We kicked a field goal to beat them with no time left. Just cool experiences, but great kids.
What were you selling? So I love that you walked the hallways. I love that you tried to get guys back. 35 guys showing up at your initial meeting. So you probably didn't have a choice. But what were you selling? Because you weren't winning at that time.
Yeah.
You're a brand new coach. What do you sell to these kids to say, come back out?
I just let them talk.
Mm-hmm.
Sit there and like you're a competitor, right? Yeah. Well, there's nothing better than coming out. Like, what else are you going to do? And then to also talk about just the opportunities, and that, it's one of those things where, and I believe it, that I've never had a kid come back to me and said, man, I wish I wouldn't have played my senior year. Mm-hmm. And so, but yeah, I just let them talk, and, I was fortunate enough to, you come back to like, you talked about a young coach going, where do you find that fine line between art and this and that? Well, we're going to go out and have fun. Mm-hmm. Like,
what do you think turned it? I mean, when you look back on it, and by the way, your early years weren't bad. I mean, you were around 500, above 500 a couple of years, and then you had that monstrous year. But you turned it pretty darn quick. What was the key? I mean, I know there's so many things, but when you look back on, if you were advising another young coach walking into a situation like you did, what would you say, hey, this is where you got to focus?
I mean, one, it goes back to consistency as far as, like, so that was my those kids were freshmen my first year. And so they were getting instilled in the culture of X, Y, and Z. This is what we will do here. And there will be these are the non-negotiables. And so the team I have this year, like, I don't have to take attendance. 6 a.m. I don't have to take attendance. Those kids, I don't have to take attendance. Mm-hmm. Like they'll be lined up on the goal line, 90 kids in there walking through. Like, there's no kid late. And if they are late, they're sprinting through the parking lot because, and it's not because they're scared of what's going to happen to them.
They want to be there.
It's about, can your teammates trust you? What are you doing? And so, yeah, just that part of it. And then obviously, we had some really good players. You start getting that. And then, stuff. And then I had a tremendous staff. I mean, at the end of it, I mean, just a tremendous staff with just awesome guys. I mean, one of my mentors I put on there was my offensive line coach.
That's right.
Who, like, year one, we did not get along at all. But he's a Horizon alum, played at the University of Washington, just an absolutely phenomenal offensive line coach. But he just it was one of those things, like we had to build the trust with each other. And now I consider him just a great friend and mentor, and just the stuff that we learned from each other, because we would sit there and literally get in knockdown, drag out conversations on Sundays to where, yeah, I'm probably not going to get home till 10, hon. It's going to be a long night. Me and Walker are going to sit here and hash this out until the last guy with the marker.
Again, kudos to you. And by the way, we're talking about Clayton Walker, who you just brought up. But kudos to you for saying, I'm sticking this out with this guy. There had to, obviously, you knew he was good, but philosophically, it sounds like you were clashing. So for other coaches that are watching this who have the same kind of challenges, why'd you stick it out? What was it about Clayton Walker? You're like, this guy, I got to make sure I work it out with.
Because I knew I wanted him on my side. He was one of those guys that just deep down, like, you knew when it came to war, I want this guy on my side. And the relationship that he had with his unit, his offensive line, was second to none. I mean, besides the point that he's a great technician and all the other things. And I like O-line coaches to fight for their O-line. Mm-hmm. You kind of got to be a dog, right? Like, you sit there like, why aren't they getting any publicity? This and that and the other. Like, that's what I want from that guy. And it needs to be a guy that, has put his nose in it and has been in that nasty position. And so, yeah, just learned a ton from him. And like I said, I think a lot of him because and the last thing too was, obviously, he was a Horizon alum. So I like hiring people that are very invested.
Mm-hmm. No bigger investment than being an alum, that's for sure. Now, you also, some of the great highlights there in your early days in Arizona, you also shared to me one of the most humbling experiences was that 5 and 6 season when you went to a new school. Walk me through that experience, and why was it a humbling experience for you?
I didn't put a lot on there because it's hard to explain. But so during COVID, we were loaded again coming through. Like, they won a 5A state championship the next year after I left. They're still good. I love to see it, how the tradition is going, and they're continuing just great success. But so during COVID was a tough time for me. I mean, I'm not a person that could sit at home. Had a young. My son was young at the time, and my wife was she was pregnant with our second one, my daughter, and so I'm thinking here, and I get a phone call from an AD, and he says, I want you to interview for this job. And I was like, I'm not leaving Horizon. He's like, just come talk to us. I think it's appealing. And we had just moved up to our house in North Scottsdale, so that it was going to be about a 45-minute drive. I said, all right, I'll come talk to him. I'm not even going to tell my wife, because I'm not going to talk to him. I'm not going to take this job. I'm telling myself that. But maybe I can have some negotiables to come back. So I go interview for the job. Same thing, kind of like the Horizon thing, but it was in a lecture. It was a big lecture hall. 17 people. They had you on the marker board, and it's kind of my element. So where it was like the running back's dad, who was a stud, they said, well, we're playing Mountain Point as big rivalry. He said, what's your 2-point play? And so I drew it up, and then it was going to be a speed option to Grubb. So that was the dad, and I flipped him his marker. I said, you think that'll work? And walked out. Well, so it worked.
Drop the mic.
Yeah. So, long story short, I'm on my way home, and they still had another day of interviews. Their AD calls me. He's like, I need what? How much are you making? Let's get this thing locked up. I'm like, Tommy, you still got interviews tomorrow, and you said you're doing second. And he's like, yeah, but whatever. So I meet with him again the next day. And this Tom he's a tremendous AD, full athletics, and Desert Vista was very appealing because they're telling, you're talking about, if you compare, like, you'd have, so one side of the mountain, very, wealthy kind of, and then the other side of the mountain, okay, not so much, but just athletes. And then so you're getting a good mix of both. And so there was a few things that I wanted. Yep, we can make that happen. I need buses to the other side to get these that XYZ. Yep, we can make that happen. So I got these 45 kids coming from the other side of the mountain. One of them just got done with an OV at Alabama, Ryland Dillard Allen. I mean, they got whatever. So long story short, month into the job, because you leave right away there. Like, you just go to this next school. So I start there in January. Toughest thing I ever had to do is go to the Horizon kids over break. Not all were there. Tell them, because they're looking like, that ain't better. And come to find out, right? But anyway, so long story short, we're in it. That, mind you, Desert Vista was 0 for the year before. And it's traditionally a very, very good school. But it's bigger. It's about 3,800 kids, maybe a little smaller now. But so anyway, they had made a bunch of promises. Well, about a month in, I started noticing just quiet from my AD, and I'm like, well, and Tommy was still a great guy. And he's like, I go, what's going on? And he's like, I'm like, you're leaving, aren't you? And he's like, well, he ended up taking the Mesa District AD job, the biggest district AD job in the state. Long story short, stuff keeps getting not promised. So I said, so we actually make the playoffs. The kids actually, we had a
went
good
5 and 6.
Yeah, we lose to a good Castile team, but we had a pretty good season from the, like, and it was building. We had young kids coming up, freshmen, lost one game, playing a lot of young kids. Long story short, I walked in and I just said, I need this, and this, or I'm not staying. Because those jobs are there where you don't win, you're gonna get let go, which I completely support. But give me what I need. So long story short, I said, well, okay, they couldn't do it after multiple meetings, and not to anybody's fault. There was a lot of hands there, and so when going in to talk to the team, the school had leaked it to the media that we mutually parted ways. So I don't care what you do. You always say you're going to find coaches that are going to be fired or have, like, that's just part of the business. I don't care how it goes down. It's tough. It's tough on you. It's tough on your family. I went in and talked to those kids, and I'm like, so my phone was just blowing up as I'm walking in, and I'm like, I look down and I'm like, they leak. I'm like, you kidding me? So anyways, it is what it is. So I go in and talk to the team, and all I could say is, like, look, sometimes, you have to stand up for what you believe in. And, if something's not getting done, sometimes maybe I'm not the guy. It's not you. I said, and I firmly believe it. I told him, I go, this group can be a great football team. Stay together. X, Y, and Z happen, and, unfortunately within the last year, year left, 45 guys transferred out. They're now on their third coach. It's just, and it's too bad for the kids, because I had a great staff. Horizon is almost an hour away from where the school was, and every one of my assistants but one came over.
That says something
to making the
well.
drive. Yeah. And it was crazy. But, so talk about, coaching's a tough business. They invest a lot. We sold our basically dream house up north to put my wife and young kid, and she's, pregnant with another, and we move into a rental home. But you just learn a lot, right? Like, you learn, you take your time. I took 5 days to accept the Millard South, just because we needed to sit down and we needed to talk and make the right decision. And I think, talking to young people, as far as coaching, and say, I want to be a head coach, I want this and that and the other, like, make sure you know who you're working for. You got to you got to ask the hard questions, and it's okay to say it's probably not going to work. We're probably not. And I know I'm not the easiest person to work for, or, that's the reality of it. But there's certain things that I just believe in, and if I'm doing something what's best for kids, and they want to let me go, then that's the way it's going to be.
Well, when all of those coaches follow you to the next job, my guess is you're doing something right to work for. I know you say you're not the easiest, but you're doing something right that people want to follow you. Let's talk about Millard South. How does that come about then? One door closes, another door opens, and how does that come about?
Yeah, so the district AD at the time was the AD at Millard South, Nolan Byer. He was the AD at Millard South when I was coaching there prior. And he had always said to me, like, I think you're the next guy. It was a long time. I'm like, well, Andy's going to be here forever. Would great coach and did tremendous things. And I said, so me and Coach Means would always keep in touch as far as a few times a year, talking ball, whatever. So in November, we were actually, because Arizona goes a little bit later, we were going into the playoffs, and Coach Means had not told anybody, but he had told Nolan, and Nolan had a short list. And so he left me a message just saying, hey, I don't know if you're interested, but I've been following your career. This is going to open up, da-da-da-da-da. And I just responded back, like, I appreciate it, but I'm not leaving. Because this was the time where we were just going into the playoffs, like, I'm a worker, like, I'm going to get this figured out as far as, like, I didn't want to leave. Nobody takes a job to leave in a year, right? Or to do anything like that. You never do it to kids or to my coaches, too. And so, so it kind of falls off, and I call him back, and I'm like, I am interested. Like, and we didn't know if, like, my wife sat down, and we're like, maybe this is a calling to get back closer to family. My parents are getting older, and her folks, she's from a small town here in Nebraska, so good to be back closer to family and stuff like that. So we kind of thought about it, and I was like, you know what, well, I'll go. There's no guarantees, obviously. Let's go interview. And I had a couple options to stay in Arizona too, but we just kind of felt that maybe that was the calling. And so, yeah, really fortunate enough. I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for what Marty Going did first, and then Andy. I mean, you're talking about two head coaches in 30-some years. I mean, it's a pretty special place, and I think that's what makes Millard South very unique from a lot of places is you just don't understand how many alumni are out there. You talk to somebody, yeah, Millard South grad, because, and they take so much pride in it, and that's because of the people around, from the Larry Ribbles that still subs at the school and all those guys. So
yeah, I mean, tremendous tradition, and boy, looks like this upcoming season, a lot of eyeballs will be on it for good reason, and we can't wait to see what the year brings up. But they got the right guy, Coach. We're gonna shift gears just a little bit here. We're going to finish up with a little 3 and out.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw you 3 questions. They're a little bit oddball, a little bit crazy, and let's see how you do. All right, 1st and 10. Here we go.
All right.
You're a golfer, right?
Yep.
All right, so you get a chance to go out and play the Masters course with one golfer, with one person. Who is it?
Tiger Woods.
Tell me why. I think I know why, but tell me why.
Tiger's the ultimate competitor. I just love how how he's helped continue to grow the game. Great ambassador for the game, and just like I said, there's just no one better. I think he'd be a great guy to hang out with for a day.
Well, he's done it. I mean, and he's owned the Masters, that's for sure. So, all right, here we go. Is it for you? Is it Remember the Titans? Is it Rudy? Or is it The Water Boy? Which one are you watching? You only get to watch one of those 3.
I'm going Rudy.
You're going Rudy. All right.
Yeah.
What speaks to you in Rudy?
I think you're always like that's the great thing about football is you always have that like kid. Like I always say, like that kid needs to have a senior moment for us. Those, and it matters, right? Whether it's kickoff team like on Rudy and what I mean by that is like making a difference. And so I think that's the cool story part of it. And nowadays obviously those are kind of, you don't hear about them near as much as far as the kid that walks on and does this and that and the other, but just I always liked that as part of it. And I just think Notre Dame has a cool tradition.
Yeah, they do. But wasn't Adam Sandler really inspiring in that?
Yeah,
from Waterboy to Star.
Yeah.
All right, we got one more. All right, I got to ask you, what's scarier to you? An Arizona Diamondback or one of those raging bulls coming after a kid dressed in all white at Dinkler Feedlot? Which one's scarier?
I'm going to stay away from the raging bull.
Did you see any of that at Dinkler?
I think they just got more cattle, but I mean, I'm scared of them too. So.
Yeah. Any Diamondbacks you ever see down there in Arizona?
I never did.
Here we are in the land of the Diamondbacks.
I know.
Well, listen, Coach, I got to tell you, there are going to be plenty of folks scared of Millard South, not just this year, for years to come. Really appreciate your time. Learned a ton, and I have. By the way, I got here. You want to use that camera? I got another half a page of questions we didn't get to, so you got to come back.
Awesome.
All right.
I appreciate you having me.
You bet, Coach. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.